All right, so let's bring back in our think tank, and joining us, Ann Bremner. All right, from Seattle, trial attorney, Court TV regular, going back in the day. Great to see you, Ann. And let me ask you.
Good to see you, Vinny. I'm glad you're well. Thanks
Awesome.
so much.
Yeah, feeling great.
Excellent.
Ann, how many times when a wife goes missing, it turns out, the husband ends up getting arrested, the husband ends up getting accused?
Right.
We've seen it so many times.
I was going to say like 100%. And exactly what she said, the victim said in this case, was in my Susan Cox Pell case. If anything happens to me, my husband did it. And Susan wrote it down in a safe deposit box. I mean, saying when it was found, and of course he had, and then he killed his kids. But it's the husband, it's the husband, it's the husband. And, oh, she just ran off. What about divorce? Just like in the Scott Peterson case. Remember Lacey's mom said from the stand and pointed at Scott and said, why couldn't you just get a divorce? But back to what you said, it's always the husband.
Byron, I'm looking at some of the potential evidence here. Blood in the trunk, that's a huge problem. But probably, to me, the most powerful thing in front of a jury would be the words of the victim herself, these recordings that she allegedly made. Will a jury, do you think, get to hear those?
That's a really good question. I mean, obviously, his defense team is going to probably try to keep those out. Whether they argue that any probative value outweighs the prejudice, the prejudice outweighs the probative value. But if they do get to hear the tapes, I think it's going to obviously be very upsetting to them. And when juries get upset, they tend to come down heavy. And obviously, this gentleman is innocent until proven guilty. But the evidence, and then obviously her own words, I mean, I don't even know how he overcomes that. The only way you can overcome it is the lawyers be successful in keeping it out on a motion in limine or something like that. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, because if the jury hears her say those words, I think it's a wrap for him.
Joseph, do you agree that this could be game over if the words of the victim get in front of this jury? And number two, do you think that they will?
Well, I guess it could be game over, but I disagree with what I just heard, and here's why I say that. Keep in mind, it's not just the words, and it's not the defense keeping it out, by the way. That's the judge's job. There are filters and rules and laws about what is reliable evidence, what can and cannot come in. It's not the defense. That's the judge supposed to do his job. It doesn't come in because the Constitution says it's not supposed to. But consider the source. These words supposedly, to some degree, are coming from the ex-husband. Gee, I bet he doesn't feel bad at all. I bet there's no bias on his part that he lost his wife, who he's still in love with, that this other guy would like her back. And now, you also have the other problem with, why did she leave? Now, we understand that someone's saying, well, it's because she was murdered, but how are they going to prove that she wasn't leaving for yet another man who just disappeared, and now there's some problem going on there? There's a whole lot of holes in this case right now. And yes, you've got some blood, but it doesn't mean he caused it. Yes, you have some disgruntled words between her and him. Oh my gosh, if we didn't have those all the time, there would be no family court law. So with all these holes and just a little bit of evidence, everyone's running to a conclusion. And to have somebody say, well, it's always the husband, yeah, that sounds like what prosecutors say. I'm just giving you a hard time, Vinny.
Well, no, you know what it sounds like? Someone who's covered probably about 150 trials just like that with guilty verdicts. But
she knows what she's talking about, clearly.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw that, Ann, but he was literally, he's not in the courtroom yet. He's still pointing the finger. He was literally pointing the finger. And I think he was pointing at you over here. I think he was pointing at you, Ann. Ann, do you think a jury is going to discount the words of the victim? And do you think the jury is going to think that, well, maybe she was up to no good with some other guy?
No, when the Powell case, we had the same thing. She ran off with the other only missing guy in Salt Lake City. She's missing, he's missing. Oh, they ran off together. I mean, it just doesn't work. And when a finger's pointing away from yourself, you've got three fingers pointing back at yourself. So you're saying if she's with some other guy, likely story, she disappeared into thin air, or, she ceased to exist via homicide.
The blood. Joseph, I want to go back to you really quickly. You dealt with the alleged words of the victim. How about the blood in the trunk? What was that? I mean, here's one excuse that I heard in a case involving a husband. Wife's blood was everywhere. Oh, yeah, we had these spontaneous bloody noses. Literally, that's what he testified to. We just, all of a sudden, there's just blood coming out of our noses, both of us, on the same day. We had simultaneous, spontaneous bloody noses. Jury didn't believe it. So what do you think about the blood in the trunk?
Yeah, you're right, Vinny. An implausible story is no story. In fact, it's worse than no story. I get that. I don't know enough about the blood in the trunk, so I can say this what I've heard and what I've read. That supposedly it's in the trunk of his car. However, I thought I also read that the car actually belonged to her. So again, it's in the trunk of a car, but when's the last time he drove it, if ever? Or did somebody who was with her drive the car with her in the back? Or had that car been gone 2 days prior before her murder? In other words, if she got into the car and left 2 days before, like the defendant says that she did, well, then now the fact that her blood's in the trunk of that car doesn't mean that he's the one who did it or he's the one that drove it. You have to pay attention to the detail. We don't have enough of that right now. But if you prove that it's his car, he's the only one who drove it, and he's the only one who had access to it that day, yeah, it doesn't look so good. And a bloody nose ain't going to save that line. That problem.
That was Dr. Dirk Greinader serving life up in Massachusetts right now.
There you go.
All right, stay where you are. We'll see if Joseph Lowe has a defense for a Playboy model. We're going on the docket next.